All right. Well, I just want to say welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us for our first Wednesday webinar. As I mentioned, unfortunately, and you should have received an email that the person we had slated to do the art of doodling unfortunately had a family emergency, so she will not be joining us today. Instead, we'll be joined by Dr. Janine Busa. She's a board-certified registered art therapist and licensed professional counselor who works for the state of Wisconsin at Mandala Mental Health Institute. And Dr. Busa will be talking to us about what art therapy is and how we can use it to benefit our mental health. So we're very excited to have her join us. Just a few housekeeping items before I hand it off to her. Please have a pen and paper handy, as this will be an interactive presentation. Also, please do not take pictures or do screen grabs to respect everyone's privacy. This presentation will be recorded and uploaded to our website, so if you don't want your video to be included, please turn off your cameras now. And I apologize, there's a tornado alarm going off in the back of me. Before we get started too, I want to remind you of other things NAMI Wisconsin is doing this month. First, we have a few more Wednesday webinars coming up. Next week, we will have a presentation about music therapy for mental health. Then we'll have a presentation about the relationship between sleep, stress, and anxiety. Finally, the last week in May, we will have an In Our Own Voice presentation in collaboration with Mendota Mental Health again. Where you will hear the stories of patients, be able to ask questions, and gain a deeper understanding of their journey and their recovery. We've also just released the second edition of our cookbook, which features shareables such as desserts, snacks, and appetizers that you can bring to a friend or family member in need. The idea behind this cookbook was that when someone has a heart attack, when someone breaks their leg, if they're diagnosed with physical illness, they're usually showered with support, messages of kindness, and food from family and friends. And unfortunately, that's not always the case when someone's struggling with a mental health condition. So you can purchase these cookbooks on our website for $10, and this will go to help support people who are affected by mental illness. At the end of this presentation, we'll have a short evaluation, so please stick around. One lucky person at the end of this webinar will receive a free cookbook. If you are in the Madison area, we would love for you to check out our 15th annual Healing Art Show, which features works of art from people who are living with a mental illness. And you can check out the exhibit at the Daisy Cafe and Cupcakery, or if you aren't in the area, we created a video showcasing the art exhibit, which can be found on our website and Facebook page. We have some free NAMI swag and raffle baskets set up at the art show. Plus they have delicious food, so please be sure to check them out throughout the month of May. Finally, May 7th is Children's Mental Health Day. In addition to working with the Wisconsin Office of Children's Mental Health to spread awareness and resources throughout the state, we have launched our new Creature Fans. So that's what you see on the screen here. Everyone who donates, whether big or small, throughout the month of May will get a free Creature Fan sent to them in the mail. We have also recently launched our Spanish version of Let's Talk About Mental Illness. So please help spread the word so we can share our free Spanish stickers, worksheets, and coloring sheets as well. So before we get started, we're going to do a couple quick icebreaker polls. The first question is, how often do you create artwork? Daily, once a week, occasionally, or never? The second question is, do you find art relaxing or stressful? And the last question is, what is your favorite type of art medium? Drawing, painting, ceramics, or other types of crafts? I'm just going to give folks just a few minutes or a few seconds to answer those questions there. And just hit submit. All right, so here are the results. It looks like people create artwork occasionally, 53%. and most people find it relaxing, so that's good. And favorite type of medium, it looks like we're about tied with drawing and other crafts. All right, thanks for participating. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter for our workshop today, Dr. Janine Busa. Like I said earlier, Dr. Janine Busa is a board-certified registered art therapist and licensed professional counselor. She works for the state of Wisconsin at Mandala Mental Health Institute. So Janine, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and bear with me because technology is not my forte. So is that working okay? Everyone can see that? Okay.
It looks good.
All right. Okay, thanks. So again, I wasn't originally scheduled to be here. I think it was originally considered doodling for anxiety. And so I will try to hit on that a little bit while also talking about, well, the stuff that I feel most comfortable talking about. So hopefully you'll get something out of it, maybe something useful for yourself or for a loved one. So, so today I'm just going to do a quick bio about myself and talk a little bit about where I work. We'll talk about what is art therapy. We'll look at some techniques that you can employ either with yourself or again with a loved one. We'll try out a technique, and then at the end, if we have time, I'll take some questions and I will either answer them, or if I cannot answer them, I will get the answer for you and give it to Crystal or Ellie. So if you have questions that come up while I'm talking, feel free to put them in the chat and I can go back then and read them at the end, or otherwise just write them down and save them for the end. All right, so again, my name is Janine Busa. I am the art therapist here at Mandala Mental Health Institute. If you don't know what Mandala is, it's actually the state psychiatric forensic hospital. So I work with people who they've all committed some sort of crime, but they were found not guilty of that crime because of their mental illness. So they're not quite ready to go back out to their house or back into the community. But they're not appropriate to go to jail. And so they come here to sort of stabilize until they're better to go back home. And so a little bit about myself. In my past life, I was a graphic designer. And so every day I sat in front of a computer screen and made advertisements selling people a bunch of junk that they didn't really need. And every day I would leave work feeling like I had missed an opportunity to help other people, to do anything to help myself. And when I was in high school, I had this really great art teacher. And also my senior year of high school, I lost one of my best friends to suicide. And that art teacher really helped me through all of that. Well, 5 years later, I'm working as a graphic designer. I'm thinking, I don't want to really do this anymore. So I called him up and I said, do you think that high school students would listen to a 5'3" Italian lady if I decided to go back and get my degree in art education? And he thought that they would, but he also asked me if I had heard of something called art therapy, which I hadn't. And he said, you know, since I'd been on the other side of the therapy table and really enjoyed art and used it as something that sort of helped me through that time, if maybe it was something that I would find interesting. And so I ended up quitting my job as a graphic designer and I went back and got my master's degree in art therapy. After that, immediately after I graduated with my master's degree, I moved out to Seattle. And so I worked in Seattle for about 10 years in community mental health. So it's people who had chronic mental health issues. A lot of them also had needed resources with housing. A lot of them had chemical dependency issues, so they were working on some addiction issues. Those had come up as sort of coping skills that they were trying to find new and healthy coping skills. And so that's really what I did out in Seattle. And so I moved here and started working at Mandala about 5 years ago. And so that's how I ended up here. And so here we are. So art therapy I guess I should I should stop and say that I'm a little tickled that Crystal introduced me as Dr. Janine Busa, because honestly, it was literally 1 week ago today that I defended my dissertation. And so that is the first time that that label has ever been used. So I ended up, because of my work that I was doing here, going and getting my doctoral degree as well, just because the specific population I work with here, there was very little resources out there to help me be a better therapist. So I went back to school to try and become better to help the patients here a little bit more. So all that being said, so what is art therapy? We should have had one of the poll questions be, have you ever heard of art therapy before? Because I would be really curious. But so art therapy is a mental health profession in which the clients and the art therapist work together, and they use art media, the creative process, and the resulting artwork to explore their feelings, their emotions, resolve conflict, foster self-awareness, help manage behaviors or addictions. It helps with developing or building on social skills. It can improve reality orientation. It definitely reduces anxiety for me, and also increase self-esteem. A goal in art therapy is to improve or restore a person's functioning and his or her sense of well-being. So art therapy practice requires a knowledge of visual art, and then also the creative process, as well as people who are art therapists have lots of education in human development, psychology, and the different counseling theories and techniques as well. And that's straight from the American Art Therapy Association. And that link is at the end of this, just so you know. So that's a really wordy explanation for what art therapy is. And I'm a visual person, I'm not a words person. And so really what art therapy is, when I define it, is I say it's when words aren't enough, they're not serving enough. And so sometimes those the images that can come up can be really, really helpful. So one thing that I didn't mention in my bio is that I suffer from anxiety and depression. It's cyclical for me. I'm usually anxious all the time. It's usually right under the surface for me. I take medication every day. I also exercise pretty regularly, and I really have to watch my sleep cycle because that very much affects me. And then I use art as well. And so words aren't enough. So for me to explain art therapy to you would actually be to show you a self-portrait I did on a good day. That's me. I'm doing well. I have an appetite. I'm eating. And then when I'm not doing well, I don't sleep. I feel really terrible, and I don't eat very much. And so you can really tell just looking at my two self-portraits, you know, where I'm healthy and where I'm maybe not feeling so hot. And so, let's see. So who is art therapy for? I mean, as an art therapist, I, of course, am biased. So I say, and it's for everybody, but really it's for anybody who's willing to give it a try. So you don't have to be an artist. I always tell people that even Picasso started with a stick figure. So an art background is not necessary. You just have to be willing to try it out. And it can be used with adults, it can be used with children, any age really. And then it can, it's really, really useful with both families and with couples. So out in Seattle, one of my colleagues had a private practice, and she did marriage and family art therapy. And one story that I like to tell people, because I just find it really sort of a beautiful story about how art therapy can be helpful, is that she was doing couples therapy with a couple who they weren't sure if they wanted to stay married. And so they had been going, you know, to her as a means of marriage counseling. And ultimately they decided that they weren't going to stay married. And so then they were having feelings around this sort of this grief that was coming up for both of them, and the divorce and the decoupling of their relationship. And they ended up making this collage. They brought in a copy of their marriage certificate and they tore it up. And then they took a bunch of photographs from their life together and created this really beautiful collage. And each of them created their collage And in both of them incorporated this torn up marriage certificate. And it ended up being this really cathartic experience for them where they could see the beauty that came from having that relationship all along, and even the idea of a new beginning coming from the end of this. And so they both had this really beautiful piece of artwork to take home that day to remind them that, you know, just because the marriage was ending doesn't mean that all of those memories are then just gone. And so I really like to tell that story, and I have a bunch of different sort of vignettes that I'll talk about throughout. But another thing about art therapy, I really like that it accounts for all abilities. So it doesn't matter your educational level or your cognitive functioning. The research study that I just completed for my degree had all sorts of educational levels involved, and it didn't matter. The artwork and the insights that came out of it were still really, really powerful. So it also can help people with chronic mental health conditions. It helps with addiction. Here at Mendota, I do a lot with they call it the AODA program, so alcohol and other addictions. And I work a lot with them. And I also do, my subspecialty is, in addition to addiction, is also grief and loss. So I do a lot of grief and loss work here as well. But it also does, it helps a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum. And I forgot a couple different, after I created this slide, I thought about, I've also done a lot of people, working with people who have eating disorders. Art therapy is great in terms of, you know, working with people who are going through some of those issues, people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and people who are blind and visually impaired. So I've worked with all of those groups, so I can account for how powerful it can be. Art therapy can be done in tandem with other types of therapies. So for example, I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I can do traditional talk or psychotherapy with people. However, I also do a lot with the music therapists that work here, and as well as the CBT teams, so cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. So it can be done in tandem, or it can be done as a standalone therapy. So this is just sort of an FYI, but for somebody to be an art therapist, they have to have a master's degree from an American Art Therapy Association approved master's program. And then to become a registered art therapist, you have 1,000 hours of direct client contact, and then 100 hours of with a supervisor, an art therapy supervisor. And then additionally, I'm licensed mental health counselor, or in Wisconsin, it's called licensed professional counselor, which is 36 months, so 3 years or 3,000 hours of full-time mental health counseling post your master's degree under a licensed supervisor. And then you take a really big test that stinks and it's really hard. So I do like to talk a little bit about what art therapy is and what it is not, because here at work, I very often will get called, well, I often get called the art lady, which I don't mind at all. But sometimes people will call me the art teacher, or they'll talk about they want to go to art class, and art therapy is not art class. So art class emphasizes technical skills. So you're learning how to draw, you're learning proportions and shading and color theory. And in art therapy group, you're really using art as one of your therapeutic tools. So it asks you to explore your inner experiences, so your feelings or your perceptions or your imagination, and then develop and express those images, and then talk about them, talk about the images that come out and what came up for you during the process of making that art, and what's coming up at the end of it, looking at the final product. So most of the artwork that I use in this presentation is my own. This is an exception. This is not mine. This is from the February 2015 National Geographic, and it is available online. I have that link at the end of this too, but they did a really beautiful story about mask making with veterans and the benefits that the veterans got when they came back from war and were experiencing some pretty severe PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and what art therapy did for them. So for example, the person who created this mask, this quote is from him. He said, I thought when he was first asked to participate in art therapy, his response was, I thought it was a joke. He was a flight medic in Iraq. He said he wanted no part of it because number one, I'm a man. Number two, I don't like holding a dainty little paintbrush. I'm not an artist. Number three, I'm not in kindergarten. And he goes on to say, I was ignorant and I was wrong because it was great. I think that this is what started me kind of opening up and talking about stuff and actually trying to get better. And so the whole article is available online. If you have time and are interested, it's a really beautiful article. So when it comes to art therapy, there's kind of two schools of thought amongst the art therapy pioneers in the field. So there is art as therapy. So art as therapy is sort of the healing comes from the creative process of making art. The art making is seen as an opportunity to express yourself, your imagination, your authenticity, and it allows you to sort of spontaneously allow creation and for these emotions to come out. Over time, this can lead to personal fulfillment, emotional reparation, and transformation. So the other school of thought is art psychotherapy. So art psychotherapy is that it's the products. So the final, when I say products, I mean the final piece of artwork after it's been created, are symbolic in communicating issues, emotions, and conflicts. So you might actually look at the finished piece of artwork, and ask it questions and have a conversation with it to see what comes up. Or you might write a story about it, do a journal entry about it and see what comes up. And then it will spark sort of the verbal exchange that you would have with your art therapist. And that would be how you help gain insight. So a lot of art therapists believe that this is a spectrum and that, and they fall somewhere in between one end or the other. So I absolutely, for example, I personally think that both things are true. I think that the creative process is really, really important, especially if you are somebody who has anxiety and needs help maybe calming down or getting focused for the day, then I think that it's the process that's really important. But if you're working on something, you know, you have a specific goal that you're working on, sometimes it's the final product that is really what you look back on and you think, wow, I didn't even realize that this was going to be an issue that came up. And then look, here it is very obviously in this painting or drawing or whatever it might be. So I just wanted to throw this in here, but you know, there's lots of ways to find an art therapist if this ends up sounding like something that's of interest to you. But you can always go to the American Art Therapy Association, so the ATA website, and they have an art therapist locator there. Psychology Today, you can always do a search there. And then you can just do a Google search in your area, wherever you are, art therapists in your area. And then how to get started is really just sort of think about what goals you would have in working with an art therapist, and then search for somebody who has that subspecialty. So for example, my subspecialty is really grief and loss. And so if somebody was having some grief and loss issues, and had tried traditional talk therapy, maybe it wasn't working for them, or just has a complete aversion to traditional talk therapy and wants to try art therapy, they might put both of those things in a search and I would pop up. Ooh. So again, as I said, I am a visual person, so I can talk and use words, but really I think that this image captures what is art therapy. This person sort of has a bit of a mess going on in their head, and then they sit down and start actually working on a piece of artwork, and all of a sudden they can breathe the sigh of relief, because what was going on in their head, whether that was anxiety or chaos or a mess or depression, whatever it is, now that piece of paper or that canvas, whatever it is, takes a little bit of that out of your body and puts it somewhere else. So now that canvas can hold a little bit of that anxiety or a little bit of that depression. And so you don't have to carry it around with you so much. I did not create this, by the way, but I don't know the person who did, and so I don't have their name on there. So now we'll talk a little bit about some things that you can do on your own, on your own or with friends or with family. And so this is where I'm going to try and touch on a little bit of the doodling for anxiety, because I think that that was what the original plan was for today. But I think that these techniques really help with everything. And so it can help people who are experiencing anxiety, but I think that it can help on a number of different levels with a number of different mental health issues. So the first one is Zentangle. And if you've never heard of Zentangle, it is its own thing. So when I say that, I mean, you can go to zentangle.com and I have, again, the links to everything that I talk about is at the end of this, but, and you can learn all about it. So if this sounds like something that would be interesting to you, then just know that that link is there in the back. So Zentangle really stemmed out of, I'll back up and talk a little bit about the background of it. So it started by this man and this woman over on the East Coast, and they're just really good friends. And her job in real life is she actually draws, when you open up a book and it says once upon a time, and there might be a giant O on the once, and then a whole bunch of really intricate sort of drawings around it. Her job is to illustrate those. So sort of these intricate introductions to books. And she was working one day and her friend came in, and he's an ex-monk. He used to be a monk. And he was noticing her while she worked that she was getting into a state of flow. So a state of flow is sort of like meditation, where all of a sudden time passes and you don't even realize time is passing. Your body sort of calms down and you are just really in the moment, being very mindful of just what you're doing, and everything else around you sort of drops away. So he noticed that she was getting into this state of flow that he had only seen in his meditation practices. And so they started to talk about, is there a way to teach people how to use the technique that she does to get them to help other people attain this state of flow? And so they came up with Zentangle. And so what it is, it's teaching patterns in the form of a step out. So when I say step out, I mean, literally when you go to any of the books or the website, the image on the left shows a step out, and that what's in red is the next step. So you're starting with the image in the top left, and then the next thing that you do is add, a little bit more, and then you're adding a little bit more. So it's teaching you how to create this pattern. And the reason that they go with patterns is because patterns to the human mind are really calming and centering. So we really like patterns. If you think about going into a restroom or a kitchen and you see tile work, and all of a sudden you notice that within the pattern of the tiles, there's one that's missing or one that's off. It might really, really drive you a bit bonkers to look at that and see that that tile is incorrect. And some people might look at it and not get bothered by that, and that's great too. But the point is that probably every person that walks into that room at some point notices that that tile is wrong, that the pattern is wrong. And it's because our brain finds comfort in patterns. And so we really want to put those together. And so creating patterns with your hands then can also sort of get you into that calm state of flow, where you stop thinking about things, and you also just find it really centering. Your brain finds it really calming to see that pattern, that thing being repeated over and over again. And so that's what makes Zentangle really, really popular. And so this is one that I made of the Seattle skyline. And this is all just different patterns that I learned through Zentangle, and then putting them all together on one surface. And I am absolutely somebody who believes in the state of flow when it comes to artwork. There's times where I'm at home and I'm working on a painting, and all of a sudden 5 hours has passed. I haven't looked at my phone. I haven't gone to the bathroom. I haven't eaten anything because I just forgot about time. And the same when I work on Zentangle stuff. So the other technique that I use a lot of, and that I think is really helpful for people at home to do on their own, is mandalas. And I have a huge love of mandalas, and I use it a lot in my work. And so these are just two examples of what a mandala is. So the one on the left is just one that you can just go online and Google mandala coloring pages, and you can print out some pretty high quality ones, such as the one on the left. The one on the right is one that I filled in and created. It's actually hanging on the wall behind me. And so that's one that I filled out. And so what I like about mandalas that's different than Zentangle is that Zentangle, you're the one creating the pattern. And mandalas, you can too. There's lots and lots of information out there. If creating one from scratch is something that you think would be enjoyable, there is lots of information out there on how to create your own mandala. But also, sometimes if you are experiencing anxiety and you're feeling like you can't even think straight, then that might be a little too much. And just to be able to go and grab an already pre-printed mandala, I think is just really, really beneficial. And so a little bit of background about mandalas. If you have never heard of them, they also have their roots in Buddhist monks. The Buddhist monks will sit there and they use these straws that they're basically like straws that are cut lengthwise. And then they have all these different colored sand. And they'll go out into the middle of nowhere and they'll put up a tent and they will work on these mandalas. And they basically sort of, they put the sand in the straw and then they use that to sort of draw it. And so they draw these huge mandalas out in the sand, and they'll sometimes work on them for like 3 months. And then when they're done, they just take down the tent and they walk away after working on it for that long and leave it out in the open to the elements, because they believe that it symbolizes the impermanence of life. And so mandalas are usually always done in a circle, which is the symbol of life. And then when the monks do it in the sand out in the open and then leave it, it's to show how nothing is permanent, including the anxiety that we might be feeling. So the thought around mandalas is that when you are filling one out, and I think this is really important, if you were to print one out and start working on it, first think about sort of what your intention is with it. So what feelings do you want to focus on, or is there an idea that you sort of want to think about and focus on while you're working on it? And then if you start from the outside and work in, the thought around that is that you're working on bringing yourself into focus. So you're trying to focus on something or center yourself. And so you would start from the outside and work your way in. If you have something that's coming up in your life, maybe like a life change that's giving you some anxiety, or just something that's going on that's different than what you're used to, you would start in the middle and work your way out. And what that does, it opens up your mind to a new idea. So you are really working on mandalas with an intention. And then, much like Zentangle, it's usually repeated patterns, and which again, your body really, really likes and finds calming. And so I think both of those techniques are just really, really helpful. The other thing that I like about these two techniques that's different than the next two techniques I'm going to talk about is that these two techniques are really structured. So you aren't just starting something without having any sort of idea of what the end is going to be like. So it's very structured. You sort of know what you're going to get at the end of it. And when you are experiencing really big feelings such as anxiety or depression, sometimes that's really, really helpful. And so that's why I wanted to sort of start with these, because these are not really doodling, but they are still really good art directives when it comes to sort of managing these big emotions that we can feel at times. So when it does come to doodling, even if you have no background at all, you can still really get some of the benefits of art by creating what looks like absolutely nothing. So sometimes we need fun and we need not structure. And so this is the complete opposite of a mandala, because this is completely unstructured. This is literally, I took a pen and did not look down and just made a whole bunch of scribbles. I have two little ones at home. Sometimes I will even have them do a scribble, and then I will take it and work from there. And so there's a couple things you can do with this. After you scribble, and you can see here is really nothing, you can go back in and try to find shapes or images and pull those images out of that scribble. So this one, again, I just did really, really quickly, and just to show you as an example. But sometimes people do really, really intricate ones. I know somebody who has their kiddos scribble like this, and then she takes watercolor and does whole, like, very intricate images out of their children's scribbles. And it might be that you find a bunch of different images. It might be that you just find one, but still, it's kind of just a fun little exercise to do. The other thing you can do with scribbles is that you just take this sort of sheet and scribble again, and then start to just do color, what I call color blocking. And so you're just filling in the solid colors and going through, and you can pick any colors you want when you're doing this. It might be that you're just picking all soothing colors for you, whatever that might be for you. And so picking out those soothing colors and then color blocking. And again, this was unexpected that I was giving this presentation today. And so I did this early this morning just to show you and as an example, but this is something that I do pretty regularly. And this one I happen to do with markers, but I do it a lot with oil pastels. And I would do pretty much fill the whole thing out, and it ends up looking really, really neat, but also it's very calming to do that color blocking technique and simple. So all of a sudden you're taking this sort of what looks like a chaotic scribble line and then and giving it some sort of order and structure and color. So the other thing you can do is sort of, if you have no art background and you're just not really even sure where to begin, I sometimes will just have people start with tracing your hand. I think hands are so symbolic in what they have to hold on to and what they have to let go of, and what they wave hello and they wave goodbye. And sometimes those are good things, and sometimes those are not good things. So hands are really, really symbolic. So just trace your hand, and then, what do you do with that? Well, you could scribble over the top of it, and then within that hand, do the color blocking, or figure out different patterns that you can repeat and maybe do, each finger a different pattern. So again, this is something that I just started this morning, but I traced my hand and I just did lines, because drawing lines drawing lines and drawing circles are both very, very calming for me. So they come up a lot in my work. So I did lines, and then this one, I just did circles. I did big circles first, and then I went back in and I added smaller circles in the little crevices between the big circles. Just some more lines. This is a tally. I had the number 5 on my brain, I think because there's 5 fingers. So these are just the tally marks. And then this is actually the number 5 that I just repeated over and over on top of one another. And after I did it, I was like, oh, that actually looks kind of neat. I'd never done that before. So those are just some ideas of some techniques you can do at home that are pretty easy. They're not, if you don't have an artistic background, I think that they won't be too overwhelming or intimidating to try, which was really what I was aiming for today when I was trying to think of just some techniques that I think would be really good for people to try at home. And so I was hoping that maybe for the next 5 minutes, I know you guys have a pen and paper in front of you, but maybe try one of these techniques for 5 minutes and just see what that feels like for you. So maybe trace your hand and start filling in just some random patterns, or do one of those scribble drawings and then go back in and see what images you can sort of pull out from that scribble drawing. Does that sound good? I'll bring everybody back in about 5 minutes, so go ahead and give it a try. So it has been 5 minutes. I'm curious if anybody thinks that it felt, if that went by really quickly. Yeah.
I think it went by really fast.
Really fast.
Yeah, I didn't get to finish my picture.
Oh, but you can. Just give me a few more minutes of your time and then you can go back to working on it for the rest of the day. Yeah, it's really funny. I will sometimes, we do some like sort of icebreaker or mindfulness moments in the groups here. And one of the ones I like to do is I'll print out really small and very simple mandalas. They're maybe only like this big. And they'll have like really simple and sort of intricate patterns inside of them. And we'll work on them just for 5 minutes at the beginning of group. And I always hear that it went by too fast and they want to keep working on them. So, so you don't have to share this with, this can be your own personal. I tell everybody that I work with that creating artwork is really like writing a page in a diary, and then to share your artwork or to share your experience of that art is really like tearing that piece of paper out of your diary and hanging it up on the wall for other people to explore. And so it's a very personal thing. And so I won't ask anybody to share, but I just want you to think about what you noticed when you started, if you felt maybe a little bit nervous about it or a little bit, I don't even know where to start or what to do or what I'm gonna do. And then the next time if you go back and work on these, notice what's happening during it. Do you sort of totally zone out during it? Do you notice anything? Do you even hear the clock on the wall ticking? Or do you just completely get focused in on what you're working on? And then notice how you feel at the end of working on it. Do you feel more relaxed than when you started? We do have biofeedback machines here, but you can't do that on a webinar. But I mean, it shows that, a lot of times people's blood pressure comes way down after working on this, even for 5 or 10 minutes. But they have shown the health benefits of, working in a studio for 45 minutes a day is really, really good for people's physical health as well, because it does get people so sort of connected into their body, and then everything just sort of calms down for those 45 minutes. So hopefully you had that experience. I do have a coworker who even the word art makes her armpits sweat. And so she does not have that experience, but for the most part, when I do this kind of stuff with people, at the end of it, they feel really relaxed. They feel like the time went by really fast, and it's an enjoyable experience that they want to do again. So then I just wanted to talk about just a few, because we only have about 10 more minutes left. And so I just went online and sort of did some searches of, doodle challenge or drawing challenges. And so if you're looking for something to do, there are lots of ideas out there. So I pulled this one up because I just sort of liked it, how it's a sort of a 30-day challenge of, what doodle could you come up to sort of match each of these suggestions. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that I found this at Target not that long ago, and it's just 300 drawing prompts, and it's just this really small journal, and even it is filled. And I put the link on if you are interested. I'm not like trying to plug Target or anything. I don't, it doesn't bother me if you buy it or not. I'm just saying if you're interested, it's out there. But so even this has, draw a sundial or eggs frying in a skillet or a gingerbread man. And so it just has these, just little prompts to get you thinking and try something new, which can be really helpful. And especially if you just don't know where to begin. And then I thought I would end with this. I just really like this. I've started coloring to manage my stress and anxiety. And then you see the mandala sort of all scribbled in. So I think what we can do now is that we'll just take some questions, and I'm going to go, I'll stop sharing. Bring everybody up. And then we can start either in the chat, or if you guys want to, if anybody has any questions or even just some thoughts or some reflections they want to share, we can open it up.
I'll start. I'm Mary Battaglia, and I started doing the scribble, and then that stressed me out because I couldn't figure out what to do with the scribble. And then I realized the pattern you were talking about originally. So then I did the hand because I wanted the pattern. I found the pattern made me more relaxed, whereas the scribble, and I'm one of those people that when you ask me about art, I'm going to say it makes me stressed because I'm not good at it. But the pattern thing felt good to do that. And then I got into a rhythm and was able to relax. So it's interesting. You must have to find your own way or process of what makes you more relaxed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mary, because absolutely this was four of thousands of different sort of drawing prompts or art directives that you could come up with that you might find helpful. And I did just want to keep it to, what can you do with a pen and paper? Because I know that the original speaker, that's what they had said that they had put out there, everybody come with that. And I do have to say, because I'm sure as a result of my years of anxiety, I got diagnosed in my late teens, but it was probably around earlier than that and just overlooked. But when I heard what the speaker who was originally supposed to do today, what was sort of on the docket, if she ever comes back and does it, I want to sit in and be a participant because I am such a structured person because of my anxiety that the thought of doodling makes me actually feel a little anxious, but I'm curious if his or her technique would be help, like if I could use that somehow. So, but yeah, I think it's, like you said, everybody sort of, it takes a bit to find your thing.
Hi, I have a comment. Due to busyness, I just do not fit meditation and artwork into my day. I want to do both, and I'm really struggling with moving them up in terms of priority. Any suggestions?
Yeah, so Mary, I think the first thing that I would try is maybe go buy a book of mandalas. You can just get them. I wish I could just give you one of mine, but they have adult coloring books that are just mandalas that you can go and get. And they are really, really helpful. And I think it will take care of both of those things at the same time, because you'll end up with a really nice piece of artwork at the end of it. But also while you're working on it, it will be, I think it'll help you get into that state of flow that you're looking for.
Thank you. I've done one mandala and enjoyed it, but that was a few years ago. Need to get back to it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And also, you could even start with, it looks like you have a whole wall of mandalas behind you that would be fun to try and draw.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Georgette, I see your hand up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I have tried doing the artwork for adults, and a lot of them are the mandalas. And I find that I get started, and for whatever reason, I can't continue. They're beautiful, but they stress me out. It's kind of like I can't do cross stitch, and count the little X's. It's more stressful to me. Now, when I was like the first person who ever spoke. I started trying to do the little thing, and that didn't work for me. So I did, thanks to you, the handprint, and then was able to get into the designs inside. So again, that more structured. Even though mandalas are structured, it produces more anxiety for me. I don't know why, but.
Yeah, I've heard that feedback before, specifically on some of the mandalas that are out there are so detailed and have so much going on that it almost you know, I've had people say it makes my eyes go funny, you know, because it's just too much. And it's the same with Zentangle. If you are looking at any of the Zentangle patterns that are really small and intricate, those might not be so helpful versus the, you know, the mandalas that are a little bit, like I said, the ones that I do at the beginning of group that don't take very long to do. They're really small and they're very simple shapes, and so not overwhelming. And so I just wonder if maybe trying to find some sort of art process that's not overwhelming.
I tried watercolor, and because it's not a controlled medium, I spent all this money on the products and I can't do it.
Yeah, so watercolor makes art therapists sort of do this because of that. There are so many populations where you would never have them work in watercolor, specifically trauma survivors or people who are actively going through an eating disorder, people who are just feeling no control over their life. You would want to use materials that you have a lot of control over, like colored pencils, markers. You could even do oil pastels, but you have to know that oil pastels do smear a little bit. They're not quite, you don't have quite as much control over them. And if painting is what you want to do, then I would suggest acrylic paints, because they dry pretty fast, so you can have a lot of control over them. They're pretty thick, and also if you mess up, acrylics are really forgiving. You can let it dry and go back over it and start over. Yeah, watercolors are tough.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, Tracy.
Okay, so my question is, I sometimes have people that use like their iPads or their phones or something, and they do that color app on there.
Yeah.
Is that as good as like drawing on a paper?
I would say no, but I have no research to back that up. But the thing is that, and somebody mentioned this in the comments about the brain-hand relationship, you're really not getting a whole lot of internal, I'm missing my words right now, sorry. But you're not getting that sort of connection to all your different body processes when you're doing something like that. So that might be a very helpful app for some people, but it's not really, you don't have really a lot of control over what's going on, and you're not doing anything in terms of like moving your hand in that pattern or motion that a lot of people find really soothing. You're just pushing a button on a screen. And so it really is sort of disconnecting from that process. I mean, there is something to, I really love just handing out I hand out these blocks of colored pencils and having people, draw. And I love the sound that the colored pencil makes on the piece of paper. I mean, there's something really soothing about that even. So, and you're missing out on all of those other sort of sensory experiences when you're just tapping a screen. I mean, you can go on Amazon and tap a screen and it's basically the same motion. And so it's great if it helps some people, but that's not my jam.
All right, that was a really great discussion. And Janine, this has been so impactful and satisfying, I think, for everyone. I know that your time is valuable and we have to cut you off here, but again, this is being recorded and you can check out the presentation on our website when that's posted. And if there's any other questions, please send them our way. Stay tuned just for 1 minute though to take our evaluation that we have here. So if you could just please rate how today's webinar went for you. This really helps us to plan for the future. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Dr. Busa.
I just want to say also, thank you everybody for having me. And if there's any questions that we didn't get to or that are sort of nagging afterwards, feel free to, if it's okay with you, Crystal, get them to you guys and you can forward them to me and I'll answer them as best I can.
We
So-
will absolutely do that. Thanks so much. And
Thank you.
and just a little pitch here that if you fill out our evaluation, you can win a free cookbook. So some motivation there. So please fill that out, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.